Greetings, everyone. Welcome to a short chat about what's happening this month up in the southwestern sky throughout the month of December. And of course, it's called the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn, and we'll get started. By the way, I'm Gene DeRemus, teacher at Excelsior. So if you were to look up in the sky this month, at the end of this month, around December 21st, you would see a really bright light in the sky, in the southwestern sky, fairly low in the sky. But it's not really one bright light. If we were to zoom in just a little bit, we would see that it's two lights. And if we were to identify those two lights, we would know that it's Saturn and Jupiter. So two of our planets, our two outer planets, our two gas giants, would be very, very close on December 21st. So this video is really to discuss with you, how did that happen? How did these two planets get so close together and make for a pretty neat show on December 21st? But first, before we get into too much detail, I want you to know that what you already know, and that is that all our planets are on the same plane. We all go around the sun on the same frisbee. And most of you would know that, because if they didn't do that, then having a conjunction would be far rarer than it already is. So this is just a video showing that we're all on the same plane and all our planets are going around. Now here's just looking at the same picture, but we're looking down. So this is a computer, obviously a computer program that tracks the planets as it goes around the sun, and we can pick up any day that we want and look at them. For example, this is a picture of our solar system out to Saturn on December 21st, 2017. So almost 3 years ago. And this depicts where the planets are in their motion around the sun. So what we want to do is have all the planets, at least three planets, Earth, Jupiter, and Saturn, to line up. So you can see obviously that 3 years ago, Jupiter was certainly out of line with Saturn as it relates to planet Earth. And Earth is the little blue dot right here. So what we want is to have them all lined up. And when they're all lined up, then that would be a conjunction. In our world, a conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. And just so you'll know that all the planets are circling the sun in the same direction. They all go counterclockwise. So Saturn is circling this way, and Jupiter is circling this way, and all the other planets are circling around the same way, counterclockwise. But what we need to understand is they don't go at the same speed. And as a general rule, well, as a standard rule, as a law, that all the planets, the closer to the sun, the faster you spin around the sun, the faster you rotate around the sun. So obviously Mercury's going the fastest, and Venus the second fastest, and Earth the third fastest, and so on. This little chart will show you just how fast the planets are going by telling you how many days it takes for the planet to get around all the way around the sun one time. So Mercury takes 88 days, and Venus takes 224, and we know that Earth takes 365. So we want to zoom in on Jupiter here for just a second. Jupiter takes 4,332 days to get around all the way around the sun, which is just shy of 12 years. It takes 12 years for Jupiter to get around. Saturn, on the other hand, goes even slower, and it takes, obviously it says here, 10,759 days, or just a little more than 29 years. So remember those two numbers, 12 years versus 29 years to get all the way around. So with that understanding, you know that Jupiter is going faster. So what needs to happen for a conjunction to occur is for Jupiter to catch up with Saturn, for starters. So Jupiter is going faster, and Jupiter just needs to move along this line. And of course, Saturn is also moving, but much slower, needs to line up and get somewhere in the vicinity of where Earth is. And then once it gets pretty close, then Earth needs to get lined up so that we have a straight line from Earth to Jupiter to Saturn. And again, this is December 2017, so almost 3 years ago. And you can also tell by this chart that Earth is kind of tucked in behind the sun in relationship to Saturn. So if we were to just look out at the night sky or look up in the sky and try to find the planets, Saturn would be hidden behind the sun. And here's what it would look like. Saturn is way up here, literally behind the sun. And you obviously would not be able to see it at this time, 3 years ago. So what we're going to do is, to get the Earth out of the way, to get the sun out of the way, let's just go forward another month. So let's just go to, instead of December 21st, 2017, let's move to January 21st, 2018. So still a little short of 3 years ago. And now the Earth has moved away from behind the sun, and we can take a peek and see what it looks like if we were to look up at the sky. And sure enough, just before the sun comes up, this would be a morning shot. You have Saturn and Jupiter, and there's Mars as well. And you can see that they are quite a ways away. So just shy of 3 years ago, the two planets were quite a ways apart. Now what we're going to do is just walk ourselves through the last couple of years and watch what happens as these planets are orbiting the sun and starting to come in conjunction. So now we're up to 1 year later, January 22nd, 2019, just shy of 2 years ago. And you can kind of, if you've been watching, you can see that Jupiter is catching up with Saturn, obviously because it's going faster. And Earth is coming out from behind, is a little further out from behind the sun. So what would it look like? What did it look like if we looked up in the sky on January 22nd, 2019? It looked like this. And Jupiter and Saturn are now just a tad closer than they were a year ago. And what's really kind of neat about this particular day, January 22nd, 2019, is look how close Venus and Jupiter were together. So it would have been really neat to have looked up in the sky in the early morning hours just before the sun came up, because the two brightest lights in the sky behind the moon and the sun is Venus and Jupiter. And the two brightest lights would have been quite visible just before the sun came up 2 years ago. Okay, let's move forward to 2020. So just a year ago, what's happening? Jupiter, again, going a little faster, is getting closer and closer to being lining up with Saturn. And if we were to look up into the sky, we would see that they are definitely getting much closer. And again, this is obviously a picture as the sun has just come up. So a year ago, January of 2020, what would that be, about 11 months ago, it would have been possible if you were to wake up in the morning and just as the sun is popping up and washing away the clouds, you would have been able to see Jupiter and probably not Saturn. So let's move forward a little further into this year, all the way to this summer. I loved it this summer. It was a wonderful time to be watching Jupiter and Saturn, because they are in conjunction, and the Earth is now, the sun is at the Earth's back. So the Earth and Jupiter and Saturn are all visible, or Jupiter and Saturn are visible at nighttime because the sun is behind us. And you can see, if you were to kind of pretend that you could draw a line from Saturn to Jupiter to Earth, they're not completely lined up yet, but Jupiter is certainly catching up and getting closer. And this summer, as sitting out by the pool, it was kind of cool to look up and easily spot Jupiter and Saturn up there, getting closer and closer together. And what was really neat is if you were there just as the sun was setting. This is a little bit later at night. This is like 11 o'clock at night. But if you were to go out at, say, 9 o'clock, right after the sun set, All the other stars haven't come up yet, but Jupiter and Saturn were bright enough that they would have popped up. So basically the only two lights in the sky would have been Jupiter and Saturn, and this would have been about their separation throughout the summer. So let's move into the fall now and see what happens. Saturn, Jupiter, and Earth, but now Earth has kind of, because of, there's got three moving parts are going on here. So Earth has kind of moved out, out a little ways out here. So, if Earth could have been frozen, then September 21st would have been wonderful. But Earth has moved around. And so again, they're not quite lined up with Earth. They're lined up with the sun, but they're not lined up with Earth. And if we were to look up in the sky, and if we had looked up in the sky on September 21st, you would have saw that it almost appeared as if they didn't get any closer. They're supposed to be getting closer and closer. Well, because of the way the Earth kind of moved away, and it became earlier in the evening, it looked like they're not getting closer just for a period of time. But watch what happens. So this is September, just a couple months ago. Now let's jump forward to about the time that I hope you're watching this video, or certainly in early December. Earth has now moved around a little bit further and is really coming close to lining up. So Jupiter, Saturn, Jupiter, and the Earth, missing by just a little bit, but it's close. So it'd behoove us, as soon as we have a nice day, a nice evening, to get out there just after the sun sets and to look up, and this is what you would see. This is probably, I think, around 8 o'clock at night. Looking to the southwest, you can see Saturn and Jupiter are very close together, but they're not on top of one another. They're just close, and this is about right. I'm actually filming this or videoing this on November 30th. So we have a very cloudy, lousy day today to look up. So I'm hoping the next couple of days I can look up and see. What I did last night was church, and I went to church, and sure enough, we looked in the southwest sky and we could see Saturn and Jupiter right after the sunset. Okay, so now let's go just forward 2 weeks and see what happens. We're getting now in the middle of December, December 14th. And what I did this time is I drew a straight line, because we know that a conjunction, they all have to be lined up. And you could see that Saturn and Jupiter don't quite line up with Earth. It misses it by just a little teeny bit. And you can also tell that Earth is now starting to slip, behind the sun, which means early evening. That the sun basically is washing out our view of Jupiter and Saturn all day long. So we have to wait until the sun sets and then quickly look to the west to find Jupiter and Saturn. And here's what you would see on December 14th, is the two of them are very close together, but you can see now that the sun has still got a little bit of glow. So if I had snapped this, if I had captured this shot just a half an hour earlier, the sun would be up and the sun would have washed out your view of Saturn and Jupiter. And it's not very long before Saturn and Jupiter will set as well. So you have to be out there in the early evening, and as soon as the sun starts disappearing, is to look for these two planets on December 14th. And now we're up to the famous day, the important day of the year, December 21st, which happens to be the winter solstice, which is kind of cool. That on the winter solstice this year, Saturn, Jupiter, and Earth will be all in one line just after, you'll be able to see it, just after the sun sets. And let's look up in the sky and see what it looks like. And there we have it, which is really my first slide. There it is. Jupiter and Saturn are practically on top of one another in wonderful conjunction. Again, I want to repeat, if you want to see this, you have to be standing outside and having a good view of the horizon, of the southwest horizon. So get away from some trees, get up on a hill maybe, and then be there. You have to be there when the sun goes down. because if you're there when the sun is still up, of course, the sun will wash it out. And if you wait too long after the sun goes down, well, Jupiter and Saturn will also set, and you won't be able to see them. So that's what happens on December 21st, and that's how it happens, is the orbits of our 3 planets and how it all works. Now, what makes it kind of neat is this only happens every 20 years. It takes 20 years for Jupiter to circle around. Remember, Jupiter takes 12 years, so 12 years later, but then Saturn has moved ahead. So it takes 20 years for Jupiter to get back lined up with Saturn from our vantage point. So unless you want to wait another 20 years, or 40 years or 60 years. And so our next slide just shows that in 2040, Saturn and Jupiter will be pretty close. And 2060, again, Saturn and Jupiter will be very close in conjunction. And then in 2080, it'll be pretty cool. It's actually going to be, so 2040, 60 years from now, not only will Saturn and Jupiter be in conjunction with another, but it's going to be, Mars will be lined up with it as well. So what I'm going to do is, I have an 8-year-old grandson. So during the month of December, I want to get out there with him on a clear night and show him either the conjunction or really close to the conjunction of these 2 planets, because he will be about my age. So he would be 68 years old. I'm almost 67. So he'll be about my age when he gets to see what he's seeing now at 8 years old. So that's kind of cool. All right, so that kind of ends our explanation of the conjunction of these 2 planets and how to see them, when to see them. And I hope that we have some nice weather sometime throughout the month of December that you get to watch this astronomical event. Thank you very much.